Yeah, it's called Conversations with Jeff, not Screaming Matches.
Yeah, you and I do not agree on Calvinism. But look how nice we are to each other.
I think it's going to really shock a lot of people, thrill a lot of people. A lot of people are going to have to do some soul searching.
It's like, you know what? What are you doing? You're spending all your time trying to destroy another Christian because you don't understand what's going on, when you should be out there winning people for Jesus.
Right.
Thank you for the job you're doing. Thanks for being willing to address these kind of issues. They're vital to the church.
I feel sorry for what's coming your way, but God bless you, man. It's a good, healthy conversation, and let's keep growing together in the Lord.
People won't change unless they hear the truth, though. And so we need to know the truth, speak the truth, and then the last one I would say is that we need to stay in the truth, no matter what the consequences are.
Okay, everybody, welcome to today's episode of Conversations with Jeff. I've been having a lot of fun putting these shows out. We've been putting out a lot of them, so it's been a lot of new people, a lot of new faces, a lot of new topics, that sort of thing. Before we get started, just wanted to remind you guys, we do have our book Social Injustice, which we put out over the last few months. Here's what it looks like. As you can see, like, we've got a lot of great authors that contributed to it. People like Andy Woods, Ken Peters, Sam Jones, Mike Spalding. The list goes on and on. We've got a lot of great contributors for that book. If you guys want more information on that, you guys can go to gatekeepersonline.com/store. Use the code Jeff. You can get 10% off. But basically with that, we're just taking a look at social justice, comparing it with Scripture, figuring out what's true, what's not true, how to deal with this. Is it a threat? If it is a threat, how do we deal with it? So check that out, gatekeepersonline.com/store. There's a description there with a lot more information. Check that out. Use the code Jeff. You get 10% off there in the store. Again, check that out. And that just kind of goes to help support everything we're doing here at the GK. Really excited about today's podcast. We've got Ryan Howard joining us. We've been looking forward to doing this for a while. But for those of you guys that don't know, Ryan is running for the Iowa House. And glad we could have you on, and we could talk a little politics today.
That sounds good. It's great to be here, and congratulations on your book. I've been enjoying my copy of that, so great to see that getting out there and having an influence there. So thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, and thanks a lot for your support. You know, we first met at the Standing Against Marxism conference out in Iowa when I was out there, and it's been kind of fun following your journey. And now you're jumping into politics, and it's a lot of craziness going on in the world today, I gotta say.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you made the trip over before all this wild shutdowns happened. But yeah, it was great to meet you out here, and that was a powerful conference, very eye-opening to what's really going on today in America, especially with regard to the church and some of the stuff there, and the importance of people standing up for our values and rights. So.
Yeah, no, 100%. Now, what made you decide to jump into the world of politics? Because I feel like everybody always has a story or like a motivating factor or something where they're like, okay, this is it, I'm jumping in. For you, what was that moment where you're like, okay, it's time for me to jump into this world?
Well, I've been really interested in politics for a long time and really starting to see where things are being eroded. Our rights are under attack today and all kinds of wild things going on, and if people aren't willing to speak up, it's just going to continue down that path. And so it's really opened my eyes to it, and I had this epiphany some years ago about work and how God has different kinds of plans for work and how it's not just pastors and missionaries. And so I had this epiphany that my work in business is something God actually wants me to be doing, and I had the same epiphany with politics where it's like there's a healthy interest in politics, and it's something that God could actually want us to be engaged in. And so as I moved forward with that, my wife is from Brazil originally, and she became a U.S. citizen late last year. And so she's really excited to get into to vote and getting engaged in politics. And so we really just saw we really got to stand up for our values and stop the foundation of this nation from being eroded and under attack. And so if we let that go, who knows where it'd go from there. But so decided to really start getting engaged, and then saw an opening in our district. We do not have conservative representation of our district right now, and so saw the opening there where we've had that for the last few sessions, but this last one, the last election, turned over to Democratic representatives. So decided we got to get conservative representation back for our district, and so trying to push that agenda forward and make sure we can have the right voice there. So decided to, put my money where my mouth is, and I'll throw my hat in the ring and go after it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, one of the things that, I know, our mutual friend Sam Jones and we've had a lot of these kinds of like conversations as well about Christians getting involved in politics, because there has been a really big push over the more recent years within some, especially more within like the Reformed camp and things like that, of let's stay out of politics. We got to keep it separate, only focus on the gospel. We don't care about Hollywood. We don't care about politics. We don't care about all these things. Essentially we give that over to Satan. That's his territory. Yeah. And so right. When you're looking at, okay, look, I'm a believer, a Christian, but at the same time, you want to be involved in politics. How does that, work out within your philosophy and belief system?
Well, I, as a Christian, as a follower of Christ, I take all my cues from the Word of God. And so if we actually look at the foundation of this nation, that's what our founders did as well. That's why America is America. That's the values that this nation was founded on. And so we're actually going back to the way it should be and the way it was originally for this nation. And if we even look throughout the Bible, we see a lot of times we may not have the right lens to look through, but if you look closer, you pay attention. When Joseph was stopping the famine or helping with the famine, get through that in Egypt, he was in the government. He was leading the government. And God gave him answers to problems, and he wasn't leading a church, and he had answers to problems that other people couldn't solve. Millions of people would have died, and he was able to get in there. And we see Nehemiah, even Jesus, he spoke truth to the leaders, political leaders of the time. And there was a lot of greed and corruption and self-centeredness and all that stuff that the people were involved in there, the Jewish leadership as well as Rome. And we saw Paul speaking up against leaders. I mean, he was in jail literally for not doing what the government told him to do. And so, John the Baptist was beheaded. All kinds of people in the Bible, all from beginning to the end, influencing politics. And so that's where, and government. And so that's where, for me, I want a faith that's active and goes into every aspect of life. It's not just something that we do on Sunday. And sooner or later, if our nation were to continue going down the path that's kind of been on the last few years, it's going to come to a crashing halt. And we see lots of other nations where people don't have the freedom to share the gospel openly, and they literally are going against what the government says to share the gospel. And that's the path if we don't stand up. And so for me, we don't have an option. There's no separation, and it's time. The church is starting to wake up and see that we do need to wake up. We need to not have this separation as sooner or later, or we're going to not have a choice whether to talk or not. So for me, that's really just a natural outworking, or supernatural, just an outworking of my faith, to have that engaged in every aspect of life, including government and politics. And so we're in a representative republic, and so we have a government agency that we're responsible for. And so we actually have a minimum to be, since we're in a representative republic, we choose our governors, our government, and so we have a minimum requirement to be informed on the way God wants government done, and to help choose the right leaders to lead us and govern the way it was designed to be governed.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things too, where the way that the Constitution is set up, government is supposed to be a government by the people and for the people. It's not like examples that we saw in the Bible where it was like either like an emperor or a king or something like that, where we don't really get a voice. Like literally, the way that our founding fathers set this up is we actually have a voice. Like every single one of us can kind of lead and kind of direct take the direction of our country. And I think that's the really cool, unique thing about our country over pretty much every other nation in the world and in history, is really how much impact we can have if we just like take a stand and make our voices heard to a certain degree.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, if you have a kingdom like we had, like with Pharaoh, or a king, the only way that works is if you have a fully and true righteous king that rules with justice, the way God's justice in that way. And obviously we don't have that. anywhere, and we haven't had that throughout history. And I mean, Israel, of course, had the right leadership, but even that, when they put an earthly king in place, that went downhill. And so we in this nation, like you said, we've got just such a unique perspective, and that's why America has been able to be so impactful, is because of the foundation we've had. And when we have things done in our nation the way they should be, our nation thrives, and that's where we see, when the Bible was taken out of schools, when prayer was taken out of schools back in the early 60s, all of the indicators of society, like divorce rates and crime and strength of child in education and all this stuff, were going in the positive direction. And that year, the 2 years there, 62, 63, when those were taken out of the schools, every single indicator started going the opposite direction. Divorce went up, crime went up, violent crime went up, all these sorts of things. And that's what you have. And so that's where we want to have this righteous leadership in government. And we, as Christ followers, are supposed to be holding government accountable. We the people, that's why we're here. If they don't do a good job, we get them out and we get someone new in. And so we see Trump coming in and starting to do some of that where he's cleaning house, and nobody's perfect, but we definitely seen him start to do some of that, and we need more people to stand up with boldness and that aren't afraid to get out there.
Yeah, and I think too, there's this idea of like separation of church and state, and like you were saying too, is really since we got essentially Christianity out of government, out of our public schools, and out of all that kind of stuff. Like you were saying, we've seen a downfall of morality, I think, in our country as well. And I think a lot of it is because we've gotten so far away from being a pro-God society. Now we're almost like an atheistic anti-God society. Like, there's no basic morals. There's no like framework that we all unify around. We're so polarized now, and I think because there's such polar opposite like worldviews. And I find that fascinating that in days of old it was we could debate over things because we both wanted the same thing. Now it seems like there's this push for socialism and then a push for capitalism. There's no middle ground anymore, it seems like, in politics. Yeah,
and there's actually it's almost like you mentioned separation of church and state, and that that was never meant to keep the church out of government. That was meant to keep the government out of the church, and that was to not have the government influencing or having a state religion where everybody's forced to worship on Sunday, and you should have freedom, and that's what it's all about. And that's where, like you said, we've seen all of these changes, and when we have the right morality there and the right leadership and that sort of thing, then the nation can thrive, and we see where we need to get back to that. And some of the priorities that this nation has had have really begun to look silly in the last month or two, as we've all been sitting at home and everybody's talking about all these important things that we got to have and get going, and it's kind of just gone silent because when we're fat and happy, let's work on something else and whatever. But now, hey, everybody's staying at home, taking some time to actually think about what's going on and what's important, and getting us back on track. And I'm really hoping and praying that a lot of our even church leadership is waking up and taking time to reflect on, hey, have we really been speaking the truth? Or maybe we should be talking about what government's responsibility is and coaching our congregations on how to engage as thoughtful believers and to be biblically informed on the issues of today. There's a survey I saw, I don't know if it was Barna, I don't remember, but it was about how, most pastors don't talk about culture issues, even though they know the Bible speaks to every serious issue in culture today. And another survey said that congregants, people in the church, want their pastors to be talking about those issues. So where's the disconnect? I'm hoping people are starting to wake up to that and bring that conversation. It's not just politicians that should be talking about morality in the culture.
Oh yeah, I mean that's something where I think that the Christian church in general has really failed, is not participating in that discussion and that debate. We've kind of almost been completely out of culture to the point to where we're not even being heard anymore, which I find that really concerning. For you being out there in Iowa, what are some of the main issues that you guys are facing out there that you feel like these are some of the things that I really want to deal with? Because like I know every single state deals with something different. I know we've got totally different situation out here in California than you've got out there in Iowa. So like what are going to be some of your main focuses campaigning, and then also after you get elected, what are some of the things that you actually want to implement and really work on?
Yeah, so we've got kind of unique position going down on here in Iowa now. You know, we've got a balanced budget. We're fiscally conservative. We've got all Republican representation now, but that's obviously at risk, and we need to make sure we're getting more conservative representation and continuing to keep that. And but you know, some of the things going on now is we've got to protect our rights. Iowa doesn't have a Second Amendment. We've got the people on the left are trying to bring in these red flag laws and all kinds of things there. And so we've got to protect our right to bear arms. We've got to protect the right to life of the unborn. And we've also got to protect our right to free speech and freedom of religion as well. That's all under attack. It's under attack here in Iowa, just like it is other places. Maybe not as extreme, but it's certainly what people have in mind. And we've also got... you know, in my community, I've been involved with the community for the last decade. I'm originally from this area, and I've been involved with a lot of the nonprofits and making sure a lot of the money that gets donated to these nonprofits are going to high-impact programs. And so what I'm seeing, though, is that there's barriers standing in the way from Iowans thriving. And one of those is there's three specific ones that I would want to highlight, but one of those is a childcare crisis. You know, right now there's an affordability issue and there's an availability issue, and that impacts our economy here too. That's actually, Iowa's lost over $900 million every year because of the childcare crisis, because that's not available. And that leads to workforce shortages. We lose over $600 million every year because we don't have enough skilled workforce. You know, in my work, I work with companies that I try and help them improve their businesses, their manufacturing operations, their business processes, getting the money to the bottom line. And the biggest thing I hear everywhere I go is we need people. You know, years ago it was financial issues. Now it's we've got these machines here, we've got the capacity, we need people. And so they're having to come up with creative ways to attract talent to get that workforce there that's needed. You know, and another one is we've got high taxes in Iowa. You know, I've got people that I know that spend 6 months and 1 day in Arizona, and they spend the rest of their time here because then they can have the Arizona taxes and not Iowa taxes, you know. And for retirees, geez, even Illinois is not known for having a good tax situation, and even retirees have it better in Illinois than in Iowa. And so we need to lower our corporate taxes and individual taxes, and because Iowa's competing for workforce. So you can see all these issues are kind of intermingled and coming together, and these are barriers standing in the way of Iowans thriving. And you know, I know one of the chapters in your book was on income inequality. I think it's the one you wrote. Yeah. And you know, there's something called the welfare cliff. I don't know if you've heard of that, but you know, we kind of, a lot of people think that people who are on state assistance want to be there, or just are maybe lazy, or don't want to get off, or don't want to get a job or get a raise because then they'll lose that assistance. But it's a little more, there's some more intricacies there, where if someone has state assistance for, say, childcare, and state assistance for rent, and state assistance for food, then they get a $2 per hour raise. Then they get another $300 a month, but they lose a $500 a month benefit. And so they actually have less take-home pay. And so they don't take the raise because they just literally can't afford it. They would lose their house, so they're stuck. And so our government policy is keeping them stuck. And so what I want to do is remove that barrier, help them be able to tier out and step off of that, because these people want to work for their livelihoods. There's dignity in work and respect in work. And so that's another barrier that we need to remove to help people today. And there's others with that as well, like licensing, job licensing, and that sort of thing as well. But removing these barriers and protecting our rights, that's really what we need to make sure we're doing here for Iowa.
Yeah, you know, and what's interesting too is, like, you know, even talking about like welfare and state assistance and things like that. You know, out of a lot of the let's say welfare ideas out there, I thought that Andrew Yang's idea of universal basic income was, if we're gonna be going down that route, at least he wasn't putting like a top line like barrier, like you only get this if you're making less than $30,000 a year, something like that, right? Because I felt like at least then it was, he was still trying to motivate people to get out and work and get jobs and start businesses and that sort of thing. Totally against universal basic income, but it's like, if you're going to trade out a lot of these different welfare programs where it's like it's only if you're making less than X number of dollars, I would rather have something like that. So if there was something like even what you're talking about, like tiering out or whatever it is, it just seems like that's going to be a lot more motivating for people to get out of their low income situation, as opposed to, like, literally I've had conversations with people where they're like, I can't make more money because I'll lose my, either disability or unemployment or whatever it is. I'm like, that's not the way that this system's supposed to be set up.
Right. Exactly. And that's what we that's where we differentiate from what the left wants and what we're wanting as conservatives is we don't want people to be reliant on the government, and people don't want to rely on the government. And when we start to see that sort of thing, it's like Andrew Yang's approach. It's nice though when he just kind of says what he really means. He actually is transparent about it, not trying to hide it like it's something else. I don't like the idea, but whenever I have a philosophy or a policy or something, I want to apply it evenly across the board. It should work out to its end. It shouldn't be, well, we work it until we get to this point, and then it doesn't make sense anymore. We got to go another route. And it's kind of like it should be philosophically and it should be reasonable, and it should work out until the end, and not just kind of all these caveats and all these sorts of things. And that's a real general statement, but that kind of applies, though. I mean, we want to make sure that there's depth and a good footing on the policies that we have.
Right. No, 100%. Now, with all this stuff going on right now with like coronavirus and COVID-19 and just all that kind of stuff, I know out here in California, we've been on like complete like lockdown since my birthday, March 16th. What's going on out there, in regards to the local government's response to coronavirus?
Yeah, so we've had we haven't had one of the official stay-at-home executive orders, but we have basically everything in place that's all just called something else. I mean, we've got most of the places are shut down. A lot of the restaurants are just doing takeout, and bars the same thing. There's grocery stores are open. A lot of the basics there. All the essential services as well are open. They're encouraging people to stay at home, that sort of thing. We've had some surprises here with a few things, and seeing our governor respond, with we had some churches that were doing drive-in services and different things there, and we saw some response there. We saw some other essential services staying open, and just some clarity coming out. But for the most part, people are encouraged to stay at home. You go into the grocery store, they've got aisles with, arrows this direction, arrows that direction, just kind of everybody doing their best. I'm doing my best too. I'm wearing the face thing, and when I go out in the store, and just doing what I can there. But our manufacturing is working as well. So it's depending on what manufacturing business is, but critical infrastructure is working. So agriculture and construction, all that's working as well. But there's lots of precautions that these companies are needing to take just to be responsible given the current crisis.
Yeah, and I feel like, especially like within Christians and stuff, there's a lot of debate about how to respond to coronavirus. Because it's like on one hand, we have freedom of religion and the right to peaceably assemble, and then on the other hand, we've got public safety. We've got people, we need to be, taking care of people, make sure that this isn't spreading. So in your kind of like worldview, how do you feel like this is supposed to play out? Do you feel like everything is getting played out the way it should be in the sense of the government response and the church response? Or how do you feel like all of this should be going on with coronavirus?
Well, I think it's a fine line to walk there, and I think that I don't know if I'd say we're doing it perfectly. I don't know that they should be ordering people to not have church or ordering people to not stay home. I do think that churches and businesses have a responsibility to the public to do things in a smart way by the guidelines that we're having. But as far as arresting people, for these sorts of things, I mean, Iowa's basically said the police will just disperse the crowds, and then if it doesn't disperse, they'll maybe be ticketing. They haven't talked about arresting people, but we've seen, like in North Carolina, I don't know if you know the Benham brothers, but they have these sidewalk counseling where they were actually defined as an essential service by the government. They had a federal nonprofit, and they do sidewalk counseling at these abortion clinics, and they were staying 6 feet apart. And one of the Benham brothers, David Benham, came and he actually got arrested. And there was all kinds of stuff that came out about that, and they're going to be, I think, taking action against the state because that was an unlawful arrest, unconstitutional arrest. So we've got, I don't think it's being handled perfectly, but I think that the citizens have responded by speaking up, especially some of the church leadership here in Iowa that I've seen. as well. Not everybody, but it's definitely nice to see our leadership in this state has responded, not perfectly, but they've responded to some of those calls for changes in the policy and updates and essential services and all that. But I think we need to be very careful. We start trying to tell people they can't assemble and they can't do these sorts of things, and we need to make sure we're protecting those rights.
Right. Now I kind of have a little bit of a philosophical question for you when it comes to like your view on like politics and, especially like Christians' involvement and things like that. So like, is it more of your take when you're looking at, let's say laws that you're going to be looking to pass or things like that? Are you looking more to enforce like God's laws and pass that into legislation, or are you more looking at just enforcing like Constitution and doing what's best for freedom for everybody? Because I know that, again, that's a big debate within the Christian circles as well.
Yeah, so I think the Constitution was written by people who were well informed on this 2,000-year-old book called the Bible. That's 66 different books written by 40 different authors and covers a wide variety of topics. It's all one congruent story, and it's God's word. And so enforcing the Constitution and our rights, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, we have these inalienable rights, and those rights can't be infringed upon. And so we need to, I'm a constitutional conservative. I want original Constitution, and I want to make sure that we're enforcing that and protecting that. But, there may be some areas where we need to get into what should the government really be legislating. And I think that we want to have Iowans, we want to have Americans thriving. And so for me, it's not necessarily about God's laws. I mean, yeah, I want God's morality, all of these sorts of things where that comes into question. We need to have that implemented so that we can thrive. I mean, we see when we have families together raising children, that's what's best for them. All the research just happens to support what the Bible says is the best way to operate. And so that's what we've got, these 50 years of research and all kinds of things that says what we need to do there. So, I think I'm not necessarily interested in being politically correct all the time. I just would rather be correct and have the right things to help Iowans thrive, and America as well. But I don't think, when we talk about legislating morality, I mean, everything is morality when we're legislating. I mean, not murdering, not abusing people, not do all that stuff are moral questions. And so I'm definitely for protecting our rights and making sure that we're not promoting something with legislation that's actually harmful to people. The government should be the government should be restraining evil and promoting good. It shouldn't be setting up people to fail with legislating some things that are not going to be best for people.
Yeah. Now, kind of talking about that too, but kind of leading into a little bit of the dealing with like abortion and pro-life and things like that. How is that out there in Iowa? Because again, I'm out here in extremely progressive California. I'm sure it's a totally different ballgame than what's going on in Iowa. But so what's going on in your local area in regards to the pro-life movement?
Yeah, so we do have plenty of those clinics here where abortion's available. We do have a lot of people who are passionate about that here, but we've got a lot of people, even on the left, that are pro-life, that want to protect an unborn baby's right to life. And so we've seen the Democratic Party kind of push those people out of their party and say they're not welcome now. But here in Iowa, we passed some legislation that was called the first heartbeat bill. And then actually the judges said that was unconstitutional, and they somehow found a right to abortion in our Iowa Constitution. And so there's legislation going on now to push that through, to get an amendment added to literally just say our Constitution doesn't guarantee abortion. And that will go through, have to go through 2 sessions. This was the first one to go through. It'd be the next one as well. And then it would go to the people for a vote. And, that's something that even with this COVID-19 crisis, our governor came out and said abortion is not an essential services. We canceled all non-emergency surgeries, and that included abortion. Well, very quickly, the ACLU came out and opened a lawsuit and basically came up with some fancy wording and some ruling and ended up saying, okay, after 20 weeks and some technical thing, okay, women risky, and then basically the conclusion is, okay, they can go back to doing that and seeing all their patients. And so that's disappointing to see that as well. But there are lots of people who are very passionate about that issue and want to see these babies thriving. My wife and I have like an in-home daycare. We're foster parents as well, and we're doing everything. I'm on the Childcare Coalition in our county, and I'm doing lots of things here with adoption services and everything to try and remove some of those barriers, so that it's not about just, hey, don't kill the baby, but we want to help the women that are going through this difficult time to be able to live life, whether they want to go through it and have adoption or they want to raise it themselves, but to have those services available to them and remove some of those barriers, because we know it's a very difficult situation to be in for a lot of these people, and we want to, I want to move towards that, and that's what we see here. People have soft hearts. We know it's not just so simple, but we need to work toward real solutions to help get at the root cause of the issue. That's what I have to do in my work, is not just put Band-Aids on things, but solve the root cause of the issue and help get it together so it'll thrive for the long term, not just some short-term solution that will help one segment of society.
Yeah, and I feel like that tends to be like a criticism of conservatives is it's like, okay, so we're against big government like involvement and things like that, but then we're also against abortion, and then they always say, well, if you're not going to have welfare and not have all these things, then what's going to happen to that baby when they are born and they're in poverty and all that kind of stuff? And that's where I feel like we as Christians and conservatives should be stepping up and kind of filling that void on our own and not relying on the government to do that. And just make it to where the government doesn't feel like they have to, step in. It's like, let's take that back, I think.
Yeah, and there's lots of ministries and nonprofit organizations that have popped up to help with that. They don't get a lot of coverage, but they're there, and that's something I agree, man. Everything that we see the government doing to help, that the church should be the first ones standing up to go and help, and to be putting our money into that. Maybe not necessarily in a new smoke machine, but into those sorts of services where, and I'm not saying I have a thing against smoke machines, but what we need to have is the church responding to meet the needs of the community. I follow, I have this blog, Your Faith at Work, and helping people connect their faith to their daily work and transforming the way they work and doing that. And there's a company out in Australia that they've got, it's called Kingdom Investors, and what they've actually have is they're starting a new model for churches where their church is actually, it's a huge building. They're funding the church through business, also through the people that go to that church, but they've actually opened businesses in their church. Their church building saw the needs. They had daycare needs in their community. They had a need for a gymnasium, a need for teaching different things, and so they opened 5 different businesses in this huge building that they got this great deal on, and then now that part of the community is thriving, and the church is the ones doing that. And they've got these, helping with adoption services too, and all sorts. They call it Future Church, and so it's a way that the church can step up and meet the needs of the community. And we do see a lot of that happening, in our community here, where the church does do a lot. And there's amazing ministries here too that help people, but we need to keep, like you said, we shouldn't be relying on the government for that. The government should be equipping people and incentivizing churches and different sorts of things and nonprofits to help provide those services, like you said, so the government doesn't have to.
Right. And I know we were kind of talking earlier, but I think it kind of ties in with it as well. But you were talking about like the issue with like daycare and things like that, and that was one of the things that you wanted to wanted to be working on, with it within your local government and things like that. So what would be some of your solutions for, the childcare, issue that you were citing earlier?
Yeah, so one of the things, brain research shows the importance of 0 to 5 years old and how that is the most critical time in a child's life for their brain development. And basically after that, 5 to 7 years, they start losing connections. So they're making all these connections and helping, there's a gap between, and that means we need high quality childcare to where those connections are being made for brain development. And one of the things we see here is that there's a gap between what the market can afford and what the childcare centers and providers can be paid. And so it just makes it affordability issue and availability. And so one of the things we're seeing is it's really needs to be a community solution where we have businesses coming together, we have childcare providers coming together, we have legislators coming together, parents, everybody, the community coming together to solve these issues. And that could be a company now, instead of just offering a 401k match or something like that, they're offering maybe to pay for some part of daycare, or to reimburse something, or some companies are even having daycare centers on site, or they're partnering with local providers to open a new daycare community and open a new daycare, and then they'll put a certain amount of money into it because they're seeing that their employees need daycare in order to come to work. And if there's a problem, there's lots of people that have absenteeism issues because of directly related to daycare issues. And so companies are starting to see the importance of that. And this coalition that I mentioned earlier is actually a lot of companies coming together to help solve this problem. And then the legislation can come in to help incentivize companies to maybe there's deductions that can come in, where we can make those sorts of recommendations, where deductions for taxes or credits or what, there's different ways to get creative with that, but really removing some of those barriers so that companies are starting to incentivize providers and employees it's actually a benefit now to come be a part of that company. So those are just a few of the things that are kind of in conversation now to see how those would work out, and I'd be excited to get in there and continue moving those forward to get the details knocked out. And make sure it's what's best for the community as a whole, families, businesses, providers as well.
Yeah, and what's interesting too, especially about a lot like this debate too, because it seems like it's happening a lot on the federal level, and it seems to me like it should be more of a discussion that should be happening on the state, maybe even like the smaller, like local cities or counties or something like that, because it seems like every single area is different income levels, different, all that kind of stuff. Like out here in California, like the cost of things are astronomical, I guarantee you, compared to almost anywhere else in the country. And that's where I feel like we do need to be having those debates, but in conversations, but it needs to be happening more on like the local level within the local communities, kind of like what you were talking about, to actually come up with the right solutions.
Yeah, that's right, and I think that local control is better. Big government is a problem, and they don't know what's going on here, what's needed in Waterloo, Iowa, Cedar Falls, Iowa, Hudson, Iowa. They don't know over in Washington D.C. I got to go out there here a few months ago, and it's just we know it's completely different. We don't have to go there to see that, and the same thing with California. And so local decisions, the more local we can make these kinds of funding decisions and these sorts of community solutions, the better. Even certain parts of Waterloo, one of the cities around here that's in my district, even different parts of Waterloo have different needs in the school communities, and even in Cedar Falls. And so even just in this little cluster of a few 100,000 people, or 150,000 people, we see differences. And so the more local we can be in some of that control, the better.
Yeah. Now, do you feel like there's any particular issues that are, let's say, being run by the federal government or debated on the federal level that we should be taking away from the federal side of things and then bringing it back to the states? Because again, that's one of those things that a lot of conservatives are talking about is, again, big government, things, we need to get stuff back to the local states. What are some of those issues that you feel like should be brought back to the states for those kinds of conversations?
Well, education is obviously a big one that we should have at a local level. Again, the local parents are responsible for the education of their children, and the curriculum and all those sorts of things, what the parents want their children taught, that should be more at a state or even a community level, or even at a school level, where the parents are deciding that and giving input to that, not this big federal, the workforce needs in Iowa are different than the workforce needs in New York. And what we need to be educated for, that should be able to be part of our community's control, and not just the same one size fits all. I mean, there's certain things like reading that's needed, and I mentor youth as well, and I've seen the difference that reading by third grade can make in a child's life. If they can read at grade level by third grade, they're going to do well academically on average. And if they're not at grade level by third grade, they're going to be behind and struggle the rest of their career. It's kind of a cutoff. And I've seen the difference that can make in a child's life. But just making sure that local communities and parents are the ones making the decisions there. That's probably a big one that I would say we need to have and move that direction.
Yeah, and it seems like ever since we've been really federalizing like the education system, it seems like obviously like education's gotten worse. Like training's gotten worse. Not to say, not to throw them completely under the bus, but it seems like everything the federal government touches seems to get worse. It's like a common theme.
True.
But I think like it's one of those things where when we're dealing with the education system specifically, like again, different people are coming from different backgrounds, different people are coming with different experiences, and I feel like we need it more kind of like fluid and adjustable, which is easier to do on a local level than it is on the big federal level, where we're basically treating Los Angeles and Des Moines and Seattle and Houston like all exactly the same.
Yeah, and one of the things that like you said, everything the government touches, it seems to just not go the right direction, and so, of course there's nuances and intricacies that it's great and it's good, but in general, I agree with that. I think that, and we need people. That's why I've been working in business. I'm working with this. My wife and I have this in-home daycare as well. I'm working for John Deere, large manufacturer, and I've got a blog and a podcast. All this other stuff I'm doing, but there are solutions that our government comes up with that would never fly in any of those other areas or any of the other industries. I mean, you know what? Let's just charge more. Let's just have more revenue. Let's just raise taxes. Let's cut costs. I mean, if something's not working, we've got to take a closer look at it. And now, there's serious cost cutting going on right now where people are really looking at their books and saying, what can we do? What can we change? How can we keep these people on board? And there's solutions where we get more creative when we can't just press a button and say, raise taxes. There's lots of ways that we can kind of remove those costs and come up with better solutions, partnering with the right people coming in the communities. And that's why I want to get in there, as that's what I've been doing, is solving problems for manufacturers and different businesses, and that's where I want to get in, is take that experience and knowledge and getting root causes of problems solved and take that into the government so we can make sure that we're setting up Iowa to let Iowa thrive for the future.
Yeah, and one of the concerns that I have coming out of this coronavirus issue, because so many businesses are shut down, so many people have lost their jobs, on unemployment, things like that. And, but then you begin to look forward towards like taxes and, how are we going to be funding the government? How are we going to be funding the local governments? Things like that. It seems like it's going to be this chain reaction of, at a certain point, we're either going to have to raise taxes on everybody, which is going to make it even worse for the individual workers, or we're going to have to start cutting programs, which is kind of what conservatives have been wanting for the longest time. So like, what do you think is going to be like the answer and the solution to actually get the economy back and going?
Yeah, well, for Iowa, we've actually got a balanced budget, and when we had Republican control, now it was big debt, and now it's back to fiscally conservative and responsible, and actually adding to the emergency fund. So we have that in Iowa, but obviously we're going to have to take a serious look at some of the programs and some of the ways that we're using the money, and on a federal level as well. And so I think that that's why I want to get in there, is to help solve this problem. And we see, when we have something like this coronavirus come up, everybody sobers up really quickly to say, to get real, to have a realistic view of reality. Even some of the wild ideas we normally hear from the left, even some of them are starting to just kind of sound more reasonable with what they're saying. It's not perfect, but I think that we need to make sure that we're coming in and not overdoing it. And we've seen some rights that are being stepped on, and we need to stand up for that. And we also need to be careful to get the right people in office. It's thank God it's an election season, so that we can make sure that we do have the right decision makers in there coming out of this for the next season that we're going to have.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too, since it is election cycle, it's interesting because I feel like to a certain degree it might be keeping people accountable to where if this was like, let's say in the middle of their term, they may be making totally different decisions than they are now. We have been seeing like a lot of big government overreach, some power grabs, but I just wonder if it was 2018 instead of 2020, would it have been that much worse? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think now, you as an elected official, we should always be close to the citizens you're representing. But I think now, like you said, we've seen some pretty big disconnects, especially on the federal level, for what the priorities are and how they're trying to shove all this stuff in there that has nothing to do with the COVID-19. And like you said, people are looking, people are watching, people are taking a healthy interest. I think that's one thing that Trump did was he kind of made people who weren't interested in politics, now people are paying attention. And so, especially with all this stuff going on, there's a magnifying glass and people are getting informed. And, as I'm calling voters every day now, even, our campaign has changed. We can't really knock on doors right now. So we're doing a lot of calls and trying to encourage people to do early voting, absentee ballots. Our primary is on June 2nd. And early voting starts on April 23rd. So I'm trying to reach out to people and let them know they can do that and make sure they're voting for Ryan Howard so we can let Iowa thrive. And that's just that's something, too, coming out of this that, our elected officials need to stay close to what the people on the ground are telling them so that they can make sure they're responding and the people will hold them accountable.
Yeah, and that's one of those things like I've said about, because like a lot of my shows I deal with like theology and church and things like that. And that's the thing I've said about a lot of pastors is, you need to be going through life with people. And I feel like it's the same thing with politicians is, what's ended up happening is you have these career politicians. They go to like, especially on the federal level, they go to Washington, D.C., they pretty much live in Washington, D.C., and they're hardly ever back home, and they're not living under their laws. And I think it is important that we are having a lot of these new, fresh faces, people that are actually living under the current laws that are running for office and things like that, because it's important that, again, you're going through life with the people where your decisions are actually affecting them.
Yeah, and that's something that I think our founding fathers, I don't think they really intended for people to be career politicians. They kind of went and put their time in, and then they kind of had to put up with all the disruption in their life and then go back to their farm or go back to whatever they were doing before their shop. And today, we see people going in and coming out just filthy rich. And not that it's a problem being rich, but I'm not sure they're coming the way they should be. And so that's something that, we need turnover. It's good. We have a lot of elected officials that have been in office for a long time that are doing a great job. So I don't mean to say that about anybody, but Chuck Grassley, he's one of the senators from Iowa that's been there for decades, and he's done a lot for the state and for this government. He's very well respected. But many of them we need turnover. We need, like you said, people who are living under these laws and are fired up and ready to get in there and make the changes. And that's exactly what happened to me, where I'm saying I'm seeing all this stuff going on around me. Let me get in there and we'll help solve some of these issues so that we can get keep everything right on the right path.
Yeah. Now, how do you feel like kind of back to the coronavirus stuff? How do you feel like the relationship has been between Iowa and the federal government in dealing with the reaction to COVID-19? Has there been the support and all that kind of stuff? Because I feel like everybody talks about New York, Seattle, and LA, because those are kind of the hot spots. But have there been issues with COVID-19 in Iowa, and has there been the support and help and stuff from the federal government, like what we're seeing in like New York and things like that?
Well, we've seen the small business loan, the PPP loans that came out, the Paycheck Protection. So that's obviously was available to Iowans, and I know a lot of companies are going through that today. We've seen some criticism from our congresswoman from the 1st District asking our governor to make the stay-at-home announcement, but we've seen from Dr. Fauci from the administration there saying I was doing a great job there. So I think we're getting good back and forth with what we need, but it's just a trying time. Every day is changing, and we're seeing, when I'm talking to voters, I'm saying, hey, what's most important on your mind today? And it's almost a silly question because obviously everybody is going to say COVID-19, and it's kind of like, well, hey, how about 3 months ago? What did you care about then? Well, we've got the priorities and the agendas that we need to keep moving forward in this time, but we can't take our eye off the ball as well with those things. But we need to make sure we're going to come out of this crisis as well, and not putting swinging the pendulum too far the other way. So, but so far, it's been okay going here with the partnership there.
Yeah. Now, do you feel like people in Iowa? Do you feel like it's like they're part of the group where they're like, okay, let's just reopen everything, go back to business as normal? Because it seems like there's a big push within like the right and the conservatives and things like that to let's just open everything back up, go back to business as usual and things like that. Or do you feel like they're more like it is out here in California, where everybody? I think they said like 90% of people are totally fine with staying at home in California. So it's like, how do you feel like the response is from Iowans themselves?
Yeah, so I haven't seen statistics on it, but from my conversations and just what I've been seeing is that I think people do want to go back. They don't want to go back to normal. I think there was some things that we should never go back to with the way things were operating. But we have seen where a lot of people just say, hey, people are responsible, put the guidelines out, let them go back and do things appropriately for their business. But I think, it's been some people have been able to take advantage of being able to stay at home or work from home, and others are really suffering big time. And so there's lots of different reasons for lots of different opinions. But we see that definitely. We want people to make sure they're being responsible, but it's really important what we're seeing, how we handle this coming out of it, to make sure we're not maybe coming out too soon, but also not staying too long, so that we can make sure that we don't wreck the economy and have even more problems with families and from a personal perspective as well.
Yeah, one of the things that's like out here in California that they're talking about is like, because obviously out here it's California, so it's the entertainment, capital and just like everything. But they're talking about like, they're not going to allow like sporting events to happen in arenas. They're not going to allow concerts, which is huge out here, or shows, or whatever it is. Like how is that going to be playing out in Iowa? Like larger gatherings or things like that. Do you know if they're kind of thinking long term? Okay, we're going to keep that at bay for a while, or again, that's one of those debates that's going on right now.
Yeah, I think that's conversation is getting started now. It's not something that I've seen a whole lot being talked about, but I know there's some very strong opinions on both sides of that as well. But I think that's something that we need to make sure we are having a fully well-informed conversation on that. I think there's too many times where it's kind of this economics 101 where we just look at one segment and we say, how can we make that segment thrive, instead of we look short term instead of looking, okay, let's look at the big picture. Let's look at all segments of society, all people, and look at long term as well. And that's something that's the kind of solutions that I have to come up with every day in my work. And that's the kind of solutions that our government should be coming up with. And that's why I want to make sure I can get in there to have that long term vision. And so that's something for this coming out of this and how we handle it when we open back up. We obviously are going to need to have a very thoughtful conversation about that.
Yeah. Now, how are you enjoying the process of running for office? Do you find like it's a lot of fun, or is it like stressful? Like how is that working out for you?
I'm enjoying it. My wife and I are having a blast. She's helping manage some of the campaign parts too, and we've had to make some adjustments in our life. But it's nice to be able to talk to lots of voters and just hear what they have to say, and see a lot of the places where my passions are crossed with their passions, and we want to see the same thing. So, remove these barriers, protect our rights, let Iowans thrive. And the whole process has been a lot of fun, a lot of great networking and different people we've got to meet, getting involved with a lot of different organizations as well, and just kind of getting in front of people and getting to know people and seeing what they care about most. And people are excited. I mean, I've had lots of people, coming and saying they want to support our campaign. What can they do? Volunteering, contributing, sharing the message, that sort of thing as well. So we've really enjoyed it. It's been obviously a big disruption, but that we came in with our eyes fully wide open. So excited to continue serving. We've been serving our community for years, and this is just another way that we can step up and serve our community.
Yeah, for sure. And then kind of as we're wrapping up as well, but like if you wanted to leave something with anybody from Iowa that's watching this, or potential voters or things like that, like what's your, I don't want to call it like a pitch, but like what's your message to them as vote for you as for your local government official?
Yeah, hey, that's a great question. So, we've got on Facebook at Ryan Howard for Iowa, and we're on our website's ryanhowardforiowa.com, and we've been doing a lot of lives as well and putting things out. But my message would be, hey, we want to let Iowa thrive. We've got these rights that are under attack. We've got barriers that are standing in the way. We need to protect the rights. We need to remove the barriers, and we need people who have been stepping up to serve our community, like I've been doing in the last decade or so in a lot of these high impact areas. And I understand what our community needs, and I want to take that passion, that compassion for helping our community thrive, and get that down to the state house and get things in place for our district and for Iowa as well. So definitely want to support Ryan Howard for Iowa, so we can let businesses thrive, let children thrive, let families thrive, let individuals thrive, and let Iowa thrive.
Yeah, definitely. And then people want to follow you like on like the socials. I know you just mentioned like the website and things like that, but what's the best way for people to like be in touch with you and keep up on, you know, your messaging and like what you're saying and what you're doing and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so Facebook's a great one, Ryan Howard for Iowa, and then also the website, ryanhowardforiowa.com. They can sign up through the email there to make sure they're staying in touch as well. There's also a way they can email me directly, contact@ryanhowardforiowa.com, and that's a way that they can be in touch and make sure they're letting me know what they care about and that we're talking about what matters to them.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I had a blast kind of running through a lot of those issues. Again, it's like important conversations to kind of constantly be having, especially here in America in general with just all the craziness. We still got to talk through all the issues, you know?
Yep, that's right. So appreciate you having me on, and congrats again on the book. And it was a lot of fun, so I look forward to talking more soon.
Yeah, definitely. Sounds good. And then everybody else as well, just stay in tune. Tomorrow morning, we'll be back with an episode of America Held Hostage podcast, bringing you your daily news from a conservative Christian worldview. And then on Monday, I'm having a guest here on Conversations with Jeff, Dennis Akajanian, who is a world record holder from playing guitar. He used to tour with Billy Graham all the time and that sort of thing. So tune in on Monday for my conversation with Dennis Akajanian. And then, we shall see you guys then.